So today I'd like to share a few stories with you about hitting the wall and how I got past a few of mine. Innovation through imitation is a process that most musicians go through where they imitate an artist they really admire, and through that process they kind of gain a better understanding of who they are as a musician. They might even be able to identify their own musical identity. So for me, I tend to extrapolate that idea, and I do it in different ways. I do it a lot, actually. I do it when I teach. I do it when I play, obviously. And I even do it when I parent. For me, imitation is a gateway to breakthroughs. In a way, I can use the process of imitation itself to help me get past some of my walls. When I was an undergraduate student, I severely hurt my lips from overuse, and it really hurt a lot to play. It was kind of like being an athlete and not being able to use your hamstrings. You could do a bunch of things, but you just couldn't do it in the way you were used to doing them, and that was really frustrating because, one, I couldn't perform the way I thought I should be performing, but my classmates were passing me by. They were much better trumpeters than I was, and they just kept going and going. So as that frustration started to mount, I contemplated leaving school. Around the same time, my grandfather had retired from about a 40-year career as a cobbler. He was a shoe repairman. He owned a shoe repair shop on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And I caught up with him at his apartment, and we got to talking, and he could sense that something wasn't quite right with me. And I told him about my frustrations. And his advice to me was really to the point. It was basically, if all the other trumpet players are good trumpet players, well, then you need to be a good trumpet player too. And at that moment, I figured, okay, he just doesn't get it. You don't just become a good trumpet player. So I did what any 19-year-old would do. I got really defensive and changed the subject right away. But after a few days, I came to realize that he was right. I just needed to address my problems, and I needed to fix them. So instinctively, I got to imitating. And I started imitating a trumpeter that I admired immensely, and it was my trumpet teacher, my trumpet instructor. I didn't think I was going to be the kind of player he was, but he just seemed so comfortable playing in almost any situation you put him in. And one of the tools he used was composition. He wrote music to put himself in a situation to make himself comfortable in almost any situation. So he was constantly writing. In fact, one of the things that he did was he wrote a book of duets. And the trumpet duets, we played them at every one of my lessons, and they were fantastic. I could play them. They always addressed a specific issue, counting or intonation. So if he could write duets to address his issues as a player and keep himself sharp, perhaps I could do that to rehabilitate my chops. So I started writing duets. And eventually, I felt confident enough to bring the duets to my trumpet lessons. And he encouraged me to write some more, which I did. And that encouragement led me to share those duets with my classmates. And they encouraged me even more. So I have a bunch of duets now, and I'm rehabilitating my chops a little bit at a time, so it's much better. My lips felt much better after playing my duets and going through that process. In this case, the imitation wasn't so much that I got to use the craft of composition. It was that I got to use the composition as a vehicle to address my physical problems with the trumpet and in my mental problems with the trumpet. I was not confident as a player. And so those duets helped me get past that wall. Eventually, about a year later, I ended up going to a summer music festival, and I got to study with 3 fantastic trumpet players, one of whom was a composer that I admired, and he overheard a fanfare that I had written for a brass quintet that I was playing in. He caught up with me backstage, and he said, hey, why don't you bring your materials to our lesson, and I want to look them over with you. So I did. I brought my duets, and we started playing my duets. We played a bunch of them, and then we came back to some other ones, and he asked, can we play them like this? And so he came up with like weird scenarios like, Can we play them like circus music? Can we pretend to be Miles Davis? Let's play them like we're underwater. All sorts of weird things. It was super fun, and frankly, we were geeking out, and I was loving it. But at the end of the session, he says to me, hey, for next week, why don't you write another duet, except this time make it about a particular subject. Something like an emotion or a color. Something like that. And evidently, that was harder than it sounded. Because I could not do it. Everything I wrote, I just erased. It was, well, frankly, to be honest with you, I had not encountered that sort of problem. See, every duet I had written had a particular purpose. I had to fix something. I had to address a problem. I just couldn't contemplate creating something abstract. I just didn't have the facility to do that. So now I've got this wall, writer's block. It's right here. And instead of dealing with it like I did before, what I end up doing is I channel all of my creative energy over here, and I end up arranging music. So I take music that other composers had already composed, and I adapt it. Imitation. So I adapt this music for a brass quintet, and eventually some time goes by. I'm not really thinking about composition. I'm only thinking about arranging. And I come across a piece for a large ensemble and a vocalist. And this piece is called Gentle Piece by Kenny Wheeler. And I'd like to share a little bit of that with you, just so you get a sense as to why I'm drawn to this piece. So after some time trying to work this piece out for a brass quintet, I hit another wall. I couldn't address this piece of music. However, I did attempt to recreate some of it, and I wanted to figure out if I could do this arrangement, how. So I just sat down at my piano in my room. It was very out of tune, I remember that specifically. So I just started playing the chords, and this was the first chord. Then the second chord. And I was supposed to play the third chord, but I skipped a line for some reason, and I played this chord, which was the fifth chord. But in my ear, and I really wanted this note. But that note with this chord represented a lot of tension for me. And it's what I was feeling at the time. I was working on a second graduate degree. I needed a piece of music for a recital. I was dealing with insomnia. So that note represented a lot of tension. And for some reason, I felt like exploring that tension. And eventually, that exploration led to an entire piece of music. That movement led to two more movements, and now this tension I was feeling is now on paper, and now I've got a piece of music I can use for my recital. I used the same basic process of imitation. I tried to hold on to what I was feeling from other composers, and I tried to recreate that, and I did that with a second piece I wrote for trumpet and piano. Both of those pieces were then recorded by a friend of mine who I refer to as a thought entrepreneur. He just always has like a interesting project going on, and it's always wild. And eventually, I even got to write a piece using the same method of imitation for my middle school concert band. So I've used this process of imitation several times, just recreate just a kernel of whatever attracted me to begin with, and I've used that to explore other ideas. For me, breaking through those two barriers at the same time, where I needed to address Kenny Wheeler's piece, and then obviously the assignment given to me by a trumpet instructor some years before about writing an abstract idea, I got to traverse those two barriers in that one chord. And I'd like to share that piece with you right now. I'd like to share the first movement of Fractured Trance with you. For me, it represents a lot of tension, but it also represents a lot of relief and release. Thank you.